Hi, it's Ms. Parrott, and this video is about the basics of the nervous system. The nervous system is a group of organs in our body that allow us to respond to our environments. It does this by sending electrical messages to tell your body what to do. This happens very quickly because the message is going from one cell to the cell directly next to it. That's different from the endocrine system, which is a system of chemical messages, and it is a long distance travel from one part of the body to another. The nervous system is made up of two major groups: the central nervous system, which is made of the brain and the spinal cord, and then the peripheral nervous system, which is made up of all the nerves that go throughout the rest of your body. These nerves are made up of chains of cells called neurons. Neurons is the super sassy science name for nerve cell, and they look really fun and weird. So they have this long skinny part in the middle and these really fun spiky parts on either side. We'll look in a second on the technical terms for those parts of the neuron. Next, we're going to look at how we actually respond, how our nervous system works to respond to a stimulus in our environment. The most basic way to look at it is there's a stimulus, which is anything that's going on in our environment, anything that we see, taste, smell, hear, or feel. There's a stimulus, our body receives it, our brain or spinal cord coordinates it, it figures out what's going on and what to do about it, and then our body does something with its effectors to give a response. Let's look at an example here. In this example, there is a mosquito. When a mosquito bites you, that is a stimulus. Your receptors on your skin feel the itchiness that the saliva from the insect bite has put into you. So receptors on our skin detect the itch, and then sensory neurons coming from our sense organs, take the message from the location of the bug bite up to the brain. So from the bug bite, up the spinal cord into the brain. Then our brain receives that message, the message of, this is a really itchy bug bite. So now the brain needs to coordinate and figure out, well, what do I do about it now? So my brain is going to tell my arm to move and my fingers to move like this so I can scratch the itch. But how do I get a message from my brain to my hand? Well, this message is going to travel through a chain of neurons called motor neurons. And motor neurons are going to carry the message to my hand and arm. Since my hand and arm are the organs that are actually doing the action my brain has asked, they're called effectors. And once the motor neurons have carried the message to the effectors, the muscles in my arm and hand will respond so that I can scratch the itchy skin. An interesting thing to note is your brain isn't always the coordinator of your actions. If you have a reflex reaction, like if you're falling and you put your hands down, or if lights are suddenly turned on and your pupils shrink like this, those are reflex actions, and the coordinator is actually your spinal cord. This lets you react even more quickly than if the nerve signal had to go all the way to your brain. One thing that fascinates me about the nervous system is that the cells in this system don't actually even touch each other. That's awesome! So how does a message get from one cell to the next if they're not even touching? Well, it's a special process called signal transmission, and it's possible because of chemicals called neurotransmitters. Let's take a look. This is a picture of a neuron. There's a space called a synapse between it and the next neuron. The major parts of the cell are the dendrites, that's these pokey things here coming out of the cell body, which is the major part of the cell. Then there's this long skinny part called the axon, and then at the end of the axon are axon terminals. Just like at the end of an airport there are terminals, or the Terminator is going to end you, right? So at the end of the axon are axon terminals. Then there's the space between this neuron and the next one, and again that's called the synapse. So messages are going to travel down the axon of a neuron and go from the axon terminal of one cell to the dendrites of the next cell. Let's look even closer at how that happens. So imagine we take this red box and we blow it up. This represents the axon terminal of this cell, and this is the dendrite of the next one. Here is the space between the two cells, the synapse. So, as I said before, the nervous system acts on electrical impulses that are caused by the flow of ions through the cell membrane of the axon. So, what we're going to look at is these 4 simple steps that allow the message to travel from one cell to the next. An electrical impulse is going to go down the axon and towards the axon terminal of cell, let's call this cell 1. As it does that, vesicles, which are just little bubbles in your cells that are full of these chemicals called neurotransmitters, start to move towards the end of the axon terminal. The little bubbles, again, are called vesicles. So vesicles with neurotransmitters will move to the end of the neuron and then release them into the synapse, that space. So now you have all these neurotransmitters, these chemicals that are going to allow a message to jump from one cell to the next. And they are here in the synapse. The third step that happens is these neurotransmitters, these little green dots, will attach to receptor proteins on the dendrites of the next cell. And when the neurotransmitter hits the receiver, the receptor protein, it tells the next cell for the electrical impulse to continue. So it's kind of like a relay race. And instead of the neurotransmitter actually moving into the next cell, that's not what happens. It's actually going to leave and go back to the original cell. So it's going to cross back over the synapse to the original cell, or sometimes if it stays in the middle, some enzymes might come and chop it up. This process is very sensitive to the presence of drugs and medicine. One way that antidepressants work is by hindering the reuptake of neurotransmitters called serotonin. So what would normally happen is your electrical impulse comes through, neurotransmitters that help regulate your mood and help you feel good, called serotonin, those are usually let out. They hit these receptors and my hey, everything's good nerve impulse continues to travel to my brain. What these drugs do is, for people that maybe don't make quite as much, the medicine blocks these little reuptake places, and so the neurotransmitters stay in the synapse and keep like ding 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 hitting the receptors and saying like feel happy, feel good, stabilize that mood. So see how drugs can help people with depression or all kinds of other illnesses. Now, other drugs can negatively affect your system by messing with your neurotransmitters. Nicotine and things like that make your body make a ton of neurotransmitters, way too much, and then when your body goes back to its normal state, you have a negative effect because you want more neurotransmitters, and so your body will do drugs or smoke or whatever to help you get back to that really feeling good situation. So those are the basics of the nervous system, the major parts, and the way that signal transmission works, as well as a little bit about how drugs and medicine can both help and hurt your nervous system by affecting signal transmission.